Hey everybody, Dan Martell here, serial entrepreneur, investor, and creator of SaaS Academy. In this video, I'm gonna tell you why I was backwards, because I really think that the way people think about startup equity is backwards. That's why I did that little flipperoo. And I'm gonna teach you how to think about what you need, the team structure, the percent equity, the vesting schedule, and make sure that you avoid some of the legal pitfalls. Although I'm going to claim I am not a lawyer. I do not play one on the internet. So definitely, go to your own counsel. But be sure to stay to the end, where I'm going to share with you how to get access to my Fundraising Like a Pro training. In that training, I'm going to talk about the 3 phases of fundraising. If you're going to allocate equity, I'm assuming you're going to raise some capital to help fund that growth. And I'm going to share with you my 7-week process for closing your round super fast. But first, let's get into it. So I got a funny story for you. When I started Flowtown, that was my first equity funding startup. We gave 1% equity to our BD guy. Maybe you've done this. And we thought, hey, he's gonna add a lot of value. Great idea. Turns out we were totally wrong. So all of a sudden now we have a guy that's got 1% equity. The business had pivoted at that point. He wasn't even doing anything for us, and we were about to raise our first round of funding, and we had to get that back. Let me tell you, that process, jumping on a plane, convincing somebody to part with their equity, getting that done in time so that we can close our round of funding was very tough. Now, it wasn't a Winklevoss moment, but it was definitely a little frustrating. So I've been fortunate enough to not only get counsel. After we went through that scenario, we talked to our startup lawyer, and he gave us the scenario that I'm going to share with you guys in this video. But I've been privileged to have the opportunity to walk probably 100 plus founders around thinking of their equity structure and the comp model and how to do it in a way that's going to scale. So what I want to share with you in this video is how to think about equity so you have a better understanding for allocating to team members. Number 1, build your dream team. Here's the way I think about it. You start off today. What's your revenue number? Could be 0, could be 50K a month. You have a team. You draw little circles with their faces on it. And you're like, hey, this is our team today. Fast forward 1 year. What's the revenue goal? What's the target? Perfect. You now have that. Then you start drawing the dream team that you're going to need to build to get to that level of scale. If you don't start thinking about maybe a key CTO that you need to hire because your current, engineering co-founder is just not going to cut it, or a CMO, this, a chief marketing officer is going to be able to drive the demand to really get to that next level of growth, or, a CPO, a chief product officer, somebody that's really going to lead the product side to free up your time as the founder to be able to, really go after more strategic projects. You're going to need to think about the equity allocation to that dream team. So number 1 is just sit down. Where are you at today? Where do you want to go? Map out all the key roles and start thinking about what that looks like so that you can use that when you're figuring out what percentage of equity you're going to need to put aside to compensate that caliber of team. Number 2, carve out your equity pool. Here's the deal. It's tough for me to say without knowing the size of your business, where you want to go, etc. But on average, I will say that most founding teams usually put aside about 15% equity for, key hires. Now, and I have a video, if you search on my YouTube channel, there's a video I did on equity and like advisors and all this stuff. So if you search equity Dan Martell, you will find some other videos talking about percentages. But at a high level, 15% is kind of what you need. Maybe it's a little high, maybe it's a little low, depending on how big the team is going to be. But think about it. You might want to give, again, I don't know what the market norms are right now. You're going to have to do that research. We're going to talk about it. But, maybe 5% to your CTO, 3% for your CMO, et cetera, et cetera. Like, maybe 0.5% to some advisors or 1% to an advisor, et cetera. Like, you need to think about what are the different people and then give them equity and carve it out of your total thing. Now, I need you to understand that every time you give somebody else equity, you dilute and minimize your ownership. But the argument is each new hire is going to make the overall business more valuable because you're going to have more horsepower, more bandwidth, more throughput. So the overall pie gets bigger and more valuable. But I want you to start thinking about carving out that equity for the next 1 to 2 years. And every year following that, depending on your funding rounds, you might have to add another, several percentage points to continue to round out that equity pool. Number 3, research compensation. Now, this is very dependent on your city, where you live, what are the market norms. But there's incredible information, blog posts, core threads, sites like PayScale and Glassdoor, AngelList has incredible content around, equity structures, et cetera. But you need to figure it out for yourself, because I'll tell you, a CTO in San Francisco in the heart of technology innovation versus a CTO in Nebraska. No knocking on Nebraska, but I'm just saying those are two different things in regards to base salary, equity. I mean, a lot of startup companies in kind of major hotbeds of innovation, the teams don't even know that equity is a thing. They might hear about it, but they don't honestly know if 1,000 shares is a lot or not. They don't even ask for the cap table. They don't understand what percentage of the total ownership does that equity represent in my business. So sometimes they're very unsophisticated. So I want you to do your own research for where you're located, where you're hiring these individuals from, so that you can understand kind of how to build the comp structure for you. Because essentially, the way I think about it is, low risk, a little risk, a lot of risk, right? So when I was building my company, Clarity, we were a marketplace for entrepreneurs to give advice over the phone. And I hired my first few engineers and kind of my CTO and my product leads, et cetera. I pretty much said, here's your base salary, here's the equity structure. If you take less base, then you get more equity potential, right? Because I'll talk about vesting in a second. If you do more salary, then you get less equity. Because it was really just like, risk. Are you willing to take no salary? Then your equity looks like this. Or do you want to take enough to cover your expenses, et cetera, et cetera. And I love it. One time, one of my engineers came to me and I gave him that option. He said, I don't need a salary. I live with my parents. I want the max equity. And I was like, I just hired an incredibly committed and driven individual. So that to me is the opportunity of thinking about how to research compensation based on base salary you're going to pay them, risk levels, and then also how much equity to entice them to stick around, do great work, feel like they're part of the founding team, and get ownership in the business. Number 4, vesting schedule. So here's the deal. Vesting means what percentage of the allocation do you get over what time frame? Meaning that if I get, let's say, 1% equity in a business and there's a 4-year vesting schedule, that means that I don't get the potential of the full 1% for 4 years. Then there's the cliff. The cliff is how long before I get any part of that equity, right? So if you think about it, if we do 4 years with 1%, you get a quarter on each year. But with the 1-year cliff, so 4 years with 1-year cliff is the norm, although there's some incredible companies testing out different models, doing 5 years, 7 years. I believe AngelList, for example, is up to a 10-year vesting schedule, just because they want to align the reward with the commitment to long-term focus, right? So what's happening right now, especially in the hotbeds of startups, is people are jumping around, right? They're literally going to work at Facebook, getting a year, getting that, going to work at Amazon, doing a year, getting their equity. And it's causing a lot of turnover amongst technical teams. So anyways, all I will say is you need some vesting schedule. Allocating stock, like I made my mistake in that giving that 1% without any vesting is not the way to do it. I actually invested in a company and they had 2 co-founders, and right off the bat, they didn't do founder vesting. They essentially allocated 50-50 of the business. They went to raise their first round of funding. In that process, one of the co-founders, the CEO, realized that his other co-founder was not going to be the right person for the business. Like literally, they got to go. And he had to buy him out in that round to clear out the cap table, because 50% equity for some person that's running around that's not involved in the business anymore will essentially stop you from growing your business, because you won't be able to allocate anything, right? And most investors won't even touch you because there's not enough meat on the bone to be able to incentivize future hires. So they had to buy that co-founder out, and it cost, I believe, $600,000. You got to think about this. So the business was maybe 6 months old. So $600,000 to a co-founder for a 6-month-old business, because he knew he had the business by the short and curlies, was not a cool scenario, okay? So I want you to think about vesting, even for you and the founding team. If you're doing a Series A, the investors might ask you to reset some of your founding stocks so that it has a vesting schedule, so that it aligns with their interest of you continuing to build a huge and meaningful company. So that's the thing. 4 years, 1 year cliff. That means they don't get the first 25% until the first year, and then it vests on a monthly schedule. Number 5, stock options versus other types of equity. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just going to say this. An option is an option to buy the stock, okay? So that's a stock option. I give you the option. You don't have to exercise it if you don't want to because there's a tax implication and all that. I'm not going to get into that side of things. But that's an option. If you give somebody, essentially allocate them the stock itself, then it's a different thing because now there's no vesting, okay? So and trust me, if you talk to some lawyers, there is restrictions, RSUs. There's so many different ways to slice and dice share structures. I suggest keep it plain Jane, keep it simple. Delaware Corp, again, I'm giving you legal advice I really shouldn't. Anyways, I'm gonna stop because I don't wanna get myself in trouble. Talk to your startup lawyer, do the vanilla. In regards to documents and structures, there's existing, templates that have been created by Wilson Sonsini, WSGR, who's a top law firm in the Valley, to Y Combinator's got fundraising docs and seed templates, etc. So just keep it simple. Don't do anything wacky. If new investors want to do some weird thing, just don't do that. Keep it simple so that you don't have to spend time into the future when you're successful fixing, because that's what will happen. The lawyers don't mind because they get paid regardless, fixing some really weird scenarios in regards to allocation. So stock options versus others. I'm a big fan of the options. Keep it vanilla. Don't do anything creative. Number 6, plan for grants and promotions. Now here's the deal. If you hire a CMO and they're amazing, you're just like, wow, they're crushing it. They're doing great. And all of a sudden now they come to you and they say, hey, when I started, you gave me 1% equity. And I feel, because I know that this other person just got 2%, that I'm more of a 2%er because I'm adding as much value as this new hire. You got to plan for that. You got to understand that if you hire somebody as a junior developer and every 6 months, this is what I love about startups, is literally people that are 23, 24, young people can just rise and all of a sudden be leading the operations or leading the marketing department at a young age. They're going to want to get compensated accordingly because they know their market value at that level of promotion. So you need to plan for that in your allocation structure. So just plan for issuing more grants of stock options and for promotions within your existing team as people kind of demonstrate their ability to handle more and more. Number 7, you need to set the expiration timeline. Here's the deal. If you give somebody an allocation as an option, they still need to exercise that option. If you have somebody that ends up getting let go or they take another job and they had options that essentially vested, you have to set a timeline for expiration. Now, some people will keep it short. Other people are arguing now to keep it longer. The norm is about 3 months, whereas they have 3 months after they leave the organization to exercise their stock options. Now, the challenge with that is there's definitely a tax implication that they need to be aware of where they're going to have to pay some taxes depending on how they structure it. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'll let them deal with their own financial tax situation, but some of them just don't have the money. I remember I had a good friend of mine that did some marketing consulting for Dropbox, and he got stock option as part of his comp structure. And obviously, you know the story. I mean, the company went to like a $2 billion valuation. He had to borrow the money to exercise his options to pay the taxes just to own the stock itself because the valuation was so incredible. And that's true for a lot of companies. I actually know people that finance stock options for employees at some of these unicorn companies because they can't afford to exercise their options, so they have to work with a financing person that essentially uses the stock as collateral to lend them the money. Super fascinating industry and financial model, but I will say you do, as the founder, have to set that expiration timeline. If you set it too long, there's a lot of administrative overhead to manage that. 3 months is the norm, but do your research and set that. So quick recap on how you should offer startup equity to your team. Number 1, we want to build our dream team, design it. Number 2, we want to carve out our equity pool. What percentage are we taking from our equity to compensate? 3, research compensation. Your city, your market norms. Use the online resources like a PayScale, Glassdoor, AngelList, etc. to figure out what those hires would require. 4, vesting schedule so that you understand how the equity vests. 5, stock options versus others. You can entertain it. You can ask your lawyer about the other options. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. Number 6, plan for grants and promotions of your team members. And 7, set an expiration timeline so people know what their commitment or needs are if they move on from your company. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I want to share with you really one of the most powerful frameworks that I teach my coaching clients. It's called Fundraising Like a Pro. Now, if you don't know this, one of my early mentors when I built my company Flowtown, the first time I ever raised venture capital, was Travis Kalanick from Uber. This is before Uber, right when it was Uber Taxi. He had hired somebody else to be the GM, my good friend Ryan, and essentially it wasn't even a thing. But that, that environment, we'd go to Travis's, what he called the jam pad to work on it. He was an early investor in Flowtown and a formal advisor, and he helped us with our fundraising process. So when I share these strategies, know that 80% of them came from the things that Travis, who went on to raise billions of dollars for Uber. If anything, regardless of all the stuff in the media, Travis is a world-class fundraiser, okay? You can't deny that. And he taught us, my co-founder Ethan and I, how to think about that process, the psychology involved, the tactics, the strategy. I wrap all that up in the Fundraising Like a Pro training, so you can click the link below to get access to that. I know it will help you close your deal really fast. I talk about the 3 phases of fundraising and really a 7-week process to get your round closed. So click the link, get access. If you found this video useful, be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to my channel if you're new. And if there's anybody that you care about that you feel this could serve, feel free to share with this video directly with them. As per usual, I want to challenge you to live a bigger life and a bigger business, and I'll see you next Monday.
Ready when you are, buddy.
Hey everybody,